My name is Kim Jolley, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Springfield, Missouri. The products you see laying on my work surface right now are just some of the Stampin' Up! Products I have used to create these two cards, and I will be showing you how to achieve all of the results I got on these cards with a couple of different techniques. For this first portion of the video, we're going to be working on the background itself. I am starting with a piece of watercolor paper cut 4 inches by 5 1/4. I like the weight of this paper for this particular project. This is basic shaving cream. I purchased at Walmart. I've put it into a styrofoam plate for ease of use. This is Clear Block D from Stampin' Up! I just like the size of it for this project. And this is Memento Tuxedo Black ink. As far as I can tell, it just needs to be a water-soluble ink. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is ink up the block just directly onto the ink pad. Then I'm going to take a little bit of shaving cream and just apply it almost like you're frosting a cake. I'm going to get just a little more. You want it to look about like that. And then I'm going to start on one side and glide it. Then I'm going to use that same scraping tool and go ahead and remove the excess shaving cream. Now, I want a little more here and I want a little down here. So we're going to go through that process again after I clean the block. Just remember, you have a little more control over this than the old shaving cream technique where you would put a bunch of shaving cream in a plate and then just sink your paper into it once you had mixed it with re-inkers, but I find that this one offers a lot more options. So I'm going to give a little there, a little down here. So that's the first portion of this. I like the imperfect, I guess you would call it the imperfectness of this. I like that it's unusual and that it's random. Okay, on to the next portion. Well, I apparently had a menopause moment because I realized that I had not turned the camera back on when I filmed the next section. Basically, what I did is I used this splatter stamp from Awesomely Artistic, the same size block we used earlier with the shaving cream, and I did first, second, and third generation stamping on this. It just gives a lot of interest whenever you use your stamp in that way. It creates a lot of depth. It makes it look like it's shaded and shadowed. If you do not know what that is, this is first generation stamping. This is second generation stamping. This is third, fourth, and so on. See, it gives a graduation of color, almost an ombre effect. So we are moving on to the next section. The next section you will need this same stamp, your Versamark pad, and your heat tool and gold embossing powder. Now we are on to the gold embossing portion of this. I'm going to use this stamp, Versamark pad, and gold embossing powder to repeatedly stamp and emboss images here. I'm going to kind of overlap it because I want it heavy. And during this process, I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you will not have to watch me do all of this in real time. Okay, that turned out pretty good. Some embossing powder got in some areas I didn't intend, but I'm not really too worried about that. I'm looking for a very artsy, almost canvas-like look to set that chandelier off. So we are on to the next segment. Once my background was finished and I knew I wanted to put the chandelier on it, I tried a plain black chandelier, and honestly it was just too blah. It was too plain. So I decided that that chandelier still needed to be black, but I wanted a little bit of sheen to it. I'm going to hold this up a little closer so you can see it. Now I'm going to show you how I did that. I took some clear embossing powder and silver embossing powder. What I did is I just took a little bit of clear and just a little bit of silver. Now, this probably would work a whole lot better if I had another container to put this in, but unfortunately I did not have another container to put this in. So I'm just going to be dumping this back and forth to cover this whole piece. What I'm going to do is, this is ordinary black cardstock. I'm going to rub Versamark all over it to give the embossing powder something to adhere to. I'm going to pour this on here. Now, if I was really going to cut this out, I would work a little harder to cover that, but I just want you to see how this looks. Once this cools, you can actually use your die to cut your chandelier out. This gives a great sort of sparkly look. It almost looks like a hammered metal. That's what it looks like. Now, of course, you would finish this up, let it cool, and then cut your die cut out of it. But here's one I did yesterday for the sample. Cut the die cut out of it, and I think it really adds a lot of interest to the card. It makes it a little more cohesive embellishment for the card because it blends a little better instead of being so matte. For this next segment, we're going to work on the chandelier. Now, on this card, if you can see this, the chandelier looks a little thicker than a single piece of paper. That's because it is. I have cut 3 of these and put them together. I think that this is a more effective way to do this than trying to raise the chandelier up with dimensionals, which would just be very tedious. Even if you use the mini dimensionals that Stampin' Up! Has now, I think that maybe this works a little better. I have used as many as 5 die cuts to do this, just to give it a little more depth. Now, when I do this, I use a little bit of mono adhesive. I just put some out on a scrap. And then this is a tiny little, sort of like a paintbrush. It is actually used to apply glue to the base of your eyelashes to add false eyelashes. Now, I do not wear false eyelashes, but I saw this tip several years ago on a stamping site, and so I bought some on Amazon, and they work really well. You can actually wash this little tip so you can reuse them. Now, the other tip I can give you is I don't worry over covering every inch of this. I just put some on the strategic areas and go forward. Otherwise, it takes too long, and I've never had any of them fall apart or come apart on the front of the card. So I'm going to speed this up a bit, but as you can see, again, I'm just putting it on some strategic areas. not getting too worried about covering the whole thing. That would take way too long for me. So here we go. Let's do this. Oh, I should tell you I cut 2 pieces in just basic black cardstock and then 1 out of the embossed cardstock. On the larger card, I used the 1/8 inch wide gold metallic ribbon. I decided on this one I wanted to use the little teeny tiny gold sequins we have at Stamping Up now. So the way I put this together is I just threaded those through and I put a little piece of the tear tape to hold that down. And then I'm not going to actually apply or glue this to the front just yet, because then it would be hard to adhere this to the black cardstock. I don't want this wrapped around the black cardstock. I only want this wrapped around this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this lined up where I want it, and I'm only going to adhere this piece. My black layer of cardstock is cut 4 1/8 by 5 1/4. And the easiest way to do this is I lay this like this to keep it out of the way. I'm going to use mono adhesive. I'm not going to take that off. I'm just going to leave it on for the additional support. I like using mono adhesive for this because you have a little bit of wiggle time if you don't get it applied quite like you want it. I'm going to basically leave this loose until I apply this to the card front. Using the same process, in other words, keeping this out of the way, I applied the 2 top layers to the card base. Now I'm going to come back with that same little brush and put some glue on the back of this. Again, some strategic spots. It doesn't have to be on the whole thing. And then we will put some embellishments on it. This glue holds quite well. I use it for a lot of stamping projects. Okay, then we just flip it, put it where you want it, and press down. Gives just the right amount of depth with those 3 layers. And I'm not worried about putting anything there because I have it secured on the back side and I have it secured underneath. Next, we're going to embellish the lights. I am using our rhinestone basic jewels for that, the smallest, and this is the paper piercer. Just pick it up like that. Sometimes they get away from you. I'm going to finish this off and then show you how I apply the sentiment. I have stamped the sentiment with the same Memento black ink we used for the rest of the project, and I've trimmed it out using the next to the smallest size of the Lots of Labels framelit dies. I thought this shape worked very well. I thought it looked elegant. I have put Stampin' Dimensionals on the back, but I've left the little plastic covering on that for right now. Now I'm going to cut some of the gold metallic thread. This is the way I do it. I don't know how other people do it, but this usually works for me when I'm trying to make these little messy nests, as I call them, of the metallic thread. So I wrap it like that. I figure out where I want it on here. Then I take a little piece of the tear tape, put it right there. That kind of captures all of that. I'm going to put it just about right there. So it's going to give me just a little added metallic. Now, another tip I can give you is, I don't know how many times I have tried to apply a sentiment with these dimensionals on here only to realize that I put it on crooked. So if you will take a little bit of your mono adhesive after you've removed the little plastic coating, put a little mono adhesive like that. Then when you put this down, it gives you a minute or two to move it if you need to. I'm going to trim that little bit right there. And I'm going to call this card done. Thank you so much for watching my video. Thank you so much, and thank you Split Coast Stampers for inviting me to join